The story we're about to view explores themes of power abuse and corruption, as well as boldness and courageousness to fight back. Please like and subscribe for more.
Elsa Whitley had always been a good girl. Pure, angelic, brilliant, and hardworking. She passed through high school with top grades and stellar recommendations, so when her acceptance letter to State University arrived, no one was surprised. Her mother cried tears of joy. Her father beamed with pride. And Elsa herself felt like she was finally stepping into the life she'd worked so hard for. The morning she left for college, her mother stood at the car door, her hands gripping Elsa's shoulders with a mixture of love and concern. My daughter, her mother began, her voice tender but firm. The university is a wild place, nothing like high school. Elsa smiled as she nodded. I know, Mom. I'm a big girl now. Yes, you are. Her mother smiled kindly, though worry still lingered in her eyes. But listen to me carefully. In school, avoid wayward company, bad girls, and boys who will lead you astray. Be serious with your classes. That's when failure starts. When students stop taking things seriously. Your assignments and attendance are also important. And ultimately, prepare well for exams. Listen and obey instructions from your professors and any other campus authority. This continued for several minutes, her mother listing off warning after warning, piece of advice after piece of advice. Elsa smiled and nodded affirmatively the entire time. Her mother finally relaxed, knowing that Elsa was a good girl who had never brought her shame or disgrace before. A week later, Elsa was settled. She'd completed all her enrollment procedures, gotten her student ID, found her dorm room, and attended her first round of classes. State University's economics department was prestigious and competitive, and she was determined to excel. Among her professors, one stood out immediately: Professor Henry Clark. He was in his late 40s, always impeccably dressed in tailored suits, with salt and pepper hair and an air of authority that commanded respect. His reputation preceded him. Students whispered about how strict he was, how demanding, how he'd failed dozens of students who didn't meet his standards. In his very first lecture, he'd laid down the law. I am a strict man, Professor Clark had announced, pacing at the front of the lecture hall. I have no tolerance for laziness or mediocrity. If you work hard, I will be kind. If you slack off, I will be heartless. I won't give even a single mark to those who don't put in the effort. Do we understand each other? The class had murmured in agreement, and Elsa had taken his words to heart. She respected him. He seemed like the kind of professor who would push her to be her best. 3 weeks into the semester, Elsa stayed late in the economics building to study. The library was too crowded and noisy that evening, so she'd found a quiet classroom on the second floor where she could spread out her notes and textbooks in peace. The building was nearly empty. Most students had already left for the evening. She was deep into a chapter on microeconomic theory when she heard it, muffled sounds coming from down the hall. At first, she ignored it, thinking it was just janitors or perhaps another late-night student. But then the sounds became more distinct. Voices, movement, something that felt concerning. Curiosity and a vague sense of unease pulled her from her seat. She walked quietly down the hallway, following the noise to a door that was slightly ajar. Light spilled out from the crack. The nameplate read Professor Henry Clark. Elsa hesitated. Should she even be here? But the sounds continued. Low murmurs, rhythmic movement. Something felt wrong. She peered through the narrow window in the door. What she saw made her blood run cold. Professor Clark was inside, his shirt discarded on the floor, his back to the door. In front of him stood a young woman, clearly a senior student based on her age, her blouse disheveled, her expression a mix of discomfort and compliance. The professor's hands were on her waist, and he was moving in a way that left no doubt about what was happening. Elsa's heart pounded. She stumbled backward, her hand flying to her mouth to stifle a gasp. And then, Professor Clark's eyes flicked toward the window. For a split second, their gazes locked. Elsa turned stiff, yet she felt heat all over. She turned and ran, her footsteps echoing through the empty hallway. She didn't stop until she reached her dorm room, slamming the door behind her and collapsing onto her bed, her mind racing. For the next week, Elsa didn't attend Professor Clark's class. She told herself she was sick, that she needed time to process what she'd seen, that maybe if she just stayed away, the whole thing would blow over. It didn't. On the 8th day, as she was leaving her Principles of Accounting lecture, a student approached her. "Elsa Whitley?" the girl asked nervously. "Yes?" "Professor Clark wants to see you in his office. Now. He said it's urgent." Elsa's stomach dropped. She stood outside his office door 15 minutes later, her hand trembling as she raised it to knock. Before she could, the door swung open. "Miss Whitley," Professor Clark said smoothly, his expression unreadable. "Come in. We need to talk." She stepped inside. The office was pristine. Bookshelves lined with economics texts, a large oak desk, framed degrees on the wall. Professor Clark gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." Elsa sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Professor Clark leaned back in his chair, studying her with cold, calculating eyes. "You saw something last week, didn't you?" Elsa's throat was dry. She nodded. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Let me be very clear with you, Miss Whitley. What you think you saw, you didn't. Do you understand?" "But You're a freshman," he interrupted sharply. "Barely out of high school. You have your whole academic career ahead of you. It would be a shame if something unfortunate were to derail that." Elsa stared at him, her heart pounding. "I've worked very hard to get where I am," Professor Clark continued, his voice low and menacing. "I have a reputation, a position, a career. I will not allow some naive girl to endanger that. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to forget what you saw. You're going to keep your mouth shut. And if you do, we won't have any problems. But if you don't—" He let the threat hang in the air. Elsa left his office feeling sick. Over the following weeks, things got worse. Professor Clark began targeting her in class, calling on her with impossible questions, criticizing her answers even when they were correct, marking her assignments harshly. She heard whispers from other professors in the department, too. Somehow, word had spread that Elsa Whitley was a troublemaker, a difficult student, someone not to be trusted. Her grades began to slip. Not because she wasn't working hard, she was working harder than ever, but the deck was stacked against her. One evening, her best friend, Madison Torres, found her crying in the dorm. "Elsa,
Look at me.
what's going on?"
Everything
Madison
is gonna
asked,
be all
sitting
right.
beside her.
Just
"You've been a
breathe.
mess for weeks." Elsa hesitated, then finally broke down and told her everything. The encounter, the threats, the way Professor Clark was sabotaging her. Madison's eyes widened.
Hey, look
"Elsa,
at me.
you have to report him."
Everything is gonna be all
"To
right.
who?" Elsa
Just
said
breathe.
bitterly. "He's already turned the whole department against me. Who's going to believe a freshman over a tenured professor?" "Then we find
Everything is gonna
proof,"
be all right.
Madison said firmly.
Just breathe.
"We fight back." Despite everything, Elsa refused to give up. She doubled down on her studies, working late into the night, seeking help from tutors, attending every class. Slowly, her hard work began to show. Her exam scores improved,
That's
her class
surprisingly
participation
insightful.
became undeniable, and other professors in the department started to notice. "Miss Whitley is actually quite brilliant," Dr. Patricia Green remarked to a colleague after grading Elsa's midterm. "I don't understand why Henry said she was problematic." But Professor Clark wasn't done. When he saw that Elsa was succeeding despite his efforts, he escalated. One morning, Elsa was called into the department head's office. Dr. Robert Kane, the head of the economics department, sat behind his desk with a grim expression. Miss Whitley, Dr. Kane began, I've received a very serious allegation. Professor Clark has accused you of academic dishonesty, specifically, plagiarism on your last essay. Elsa's world tilted. What? That's not true. He's provided evidence, Dr. Kane said, sliding a folder across the desk. Elsa opened it. Inside was her essay, with sections highlighted and compared to an online source. But she'd never plagiarized. She'd written every word herself. He fabricated this, Elsa said, her voice shaking. He's lying. Dr. Kane sighed. These are serious accusations, Miss Whitley, against a respected professor. He's been harassing me, Elsa blurted out. He's been sabotaging me because I saw him with a student, a senior, in his office. They were together, inappropriately. Dr. Kane's expression shifted. That's a very serious claim. It's the truth. Do you have proof? Elsa's heart sank. No. But the student, her name is Amara Bennett. She was there. She knows. After several agonizing days of investigation, Amara Bennett was called in. At first, she denied everything, terrified of the consequences. But when pressed, when shown the weight of the situation, she finally broke. I'm pregnant, Amara admitted quietly, tears streaming down her face. It's his, Professor Clark's. The room fell silent. Professor Clark, who'd been sitting confidently in the corner, went pale. That's absurd. She's lying. Then you won't mind a paternity test. Lying. Then you won't mind a paternity test, Dr. Kane said coolly. Professor Clark stammered, then suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed. He woke up in the campus medical center. While he was unconscious, a blood sample had been taken. Standard procedure for someone who'd fainted. The DNA test was ordered quietly. 2 weeks later, the results came back. Positive match. Professor Henry Clark was fired, his credentials revoked, and charges filed. Amara received counseling and support from the university. Elsa was publicly cleared of all accusations, her record restored. The university launched a broader investigation, uncovering several other instances of misconduct. New policies were put in place, and a mandatory course on student rights and professional ethics was added to the curriculum. As for Elsa, she graduated 4 years later with honors, her faith in justice and in herself restored.
Thanks for watching. Drop a comment in the comment section. Tell us what you think. Till we meet again.